So my name is Melanie Gray, and I'll be taking through Essentials of Academic Writing for Masters. And welcome to the course. Any questions, put them in the chat. So essentially when you arrive at GC or a UK university, there are certain values that you uphold and you follow. And if you uphold these values and integrate them to all your writing, it'll produce better work. So essentially what you're doing, you'll be developing the skills to integrate the secondary sources into your writing. You'll be acknowledging the work of authors correctly. You'll be using linking words and phrases to make your work flow and developing good academic grammar, vocabulary and style. And you'll be making yourself understood so lecturers, program leaders, etc. can follow what you're writing without any stress, and it'll be less stressful for you. So understand, so you've got your first piece of coursework. Imagine you have your first piece of coursework. You need to understand all aspects of the task. There are different types of assignments. You need to plan it and beware of going off topic, manage your time, and of course research comes first. So that is a QR code for a Padlet, which is an interactive storyboard. So you can either take a photograph of it and most probably open it up on your phone, or I will copy it and put the link into the chat. It's just probably easier. Okay, and for those of you who are watching the recording, you can look under the module under week 1 in the EAP module, and you'll also find the Padlet there. Okay, so have a look at, so click on the Padlet and tell me whether you can access it okay. It's full of, jam-packed, full of good information. Tell me whether you can access it properly. Great. Okay, so a Padlet's a really good way of storing information and putting comments which are relevant to the good. So there are certain guidelines, and I know sometimes you might think, oh, it's not really that important, or I'm just putting work across, but at your level of work and the complexity of the work that you're producing, it is really fundamental. Good. It is really fundamental that you produce as good a piece of work as possible, because you've only got 1 year to do it. Okay, student who just came in, can you put the program that you're studying in the chat function, please? Okay, so you're reading with a critical mission. That means when you're reading the sources, when you're researching areas, you are not just reading for the sake of reading words. You're answering a question. So you're not simply accepting everything that you read. If you don't need something, then you use something else. Organize your work. Okay, Mekenge, good. Organize your work in advance. That means planning. Showing evidence of systematic thought and argument. Express yourself very clearly. That means when you write your sentences, and you structure your report sections or your paragraphs, that each sentence means something, and the sentence that carries on after it, and I'll explain this later, will also mean something. All the words have strong meanings. Careful presentation, accurate typing, proofreading, helpful diagrams, and of course referencing, and then watch the word count. So I think one of the main things to think of when you start writing is, who is your audience? So this may seem like really clear. So put up in the chat, you're writing your coursework. Who is your audience? Because you'll be writing for that audience. Put up in the chat, who's your audience? Who's your audience, and who will be reading it? You're writing for a magazine, a student blog. Okay, so your audience is the people in your field. Your audience is your, okay, yes, good. So the audience is people in your field, the lecturers and module leaders, yes. So essentially you're writing you're writing in that language. You're writing for your peer group. So you're not writing for like a tabloid newspaper or the person in the street or a student blog or people who are out with your field. So you will be using terminology, phrases, vocabulary, etc. that is specific and relevant to your field. So you've got the style. So personal pronouns. Personal pronouns are things like I, we. So tell me, will you be using personal pronouns in your work? Good. No personal pronouns. So personal pronouns aren't used because you are using secondary sources, and essentially it is not, yeah, good. It is not, though, it's not your opinions. You have your ideas, but they are supported by secondary referencing. So if you have a look at, go back to the Padlet, you should be able to open it up in another window. Go back to the Padlet and you will see there, formal, informal language. So look along on the second column and you'll see informal language there to avoid. And the reason why you would avoid things like many and a lot of is because it's not specific. So wherever possible, you need to be as specific and precise as possible. Use numbers. Don't say a few years ago, say a decade or approximately 5 years. Be precise and use numbers wherever possible. Be clear and back up with evidence. And we're going on to that in slide 9. Be objective, avoid sweeping generalizations. And I think that might be on the Padlet as well. Okay. Yes, sweeping generalizations. And if you look in that, the column to the right of the Padlet, you will see accurate use of language. Okay, so for example, there, that second paragraph there, construction is a tough industry for sure and is made up of thousands of tough people. Now that's informal, because tough is not a word, an academic, to be used here. For sure is informal, and thousands of tough people, that's also informal. So that's a kind of an example of work you would avoid. So admit to limitations, the flaws and shortcomings. When you're doing your dissertation, when you're writing your research reports, when you're gathering data, there's always limitations. So it's always advised to be able to admit to any limitations or shortcomings as you meet them. So I hope you can see that, okay? Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Okay, differences in the disciplines. So there's your descriptive writing and there's your critical writing. So descriptive writing you might have done at school, back through school, been to college, or the first years at undergraduate. So when you're doing your descriptive writing, you're introducing, just have a read through that, and you're organizing and evaluating evidence. So when you're critically reading and you're critically writing, you are looking for evidence in the form of secondary sources which supports what you say, and you will have different authors saying different things, and you'll be possibly comparing and contrasting them, looking at their shortcomings, etc. You'll be making comparisons between materials. You'll be looking at why something didn't work. You'll be applying your own judgment. So when I do the session next week, it's on integrating sources. So next week, I'll be covering how to integrate sources at the same time as applying your own judgment, which may seem a bit confusing at the minute. So critical writing, you're making links between areas of knowledge and you're weighing up alternatives. You're evaluating, arguing, contesting, and drawing conclusions from what you've read. So essentially, you're not accepting everything purely at face value. And then you have the structure. So the conventional structure of an essay or report: introduction, body, and conclusion. So if you go back to the look at the Padlet, okay, yes, you've got types of assignments to accept, and there's an example. You can go back to this Padlet afterwards. Okay, so you'll be organizing your sentence into coherent paragraphs of reasonable length. What signals a new paragraph? And in fact, next the week after, so that's week 3, I'll be doing a session on writing paragraphs and how to link one paragraph to the next and how to actually structure the paragraph so it flows and it makes sense. So can you put in the chat what kind of assignment you'll be doing at the moment or doing next? Is it a report? Is it an assignment? Put in the chat what style you'll be using. What kind of assignment? What kind of coursework have you been given? Okay, just put it in when you've okay, just an assignment, not a report. Okay, good. So you'll be using paragraphs. Now make sure, don't make your paragraphs too long. You can always divide a paragraph up. Good. So organize sentence into coherent paragraphs. What signals new paragraphs? So go back to the Padlet and you will see there, why do you need a new paragraph? So you've got paragraph structure. So click on the paragraph. You should, yes, sometimes it's a little bit slow to open because it's got material uploaded to it. Actually, oh yeah. Okay, so you've got the main body paragraphs. Your assignment, you have the introduction. Your assignment is made up of paragraphs. A report is made up of sections, which are kind of precise paragraphs. So essay there. If you look in the main body paragraphs document that's on the Padlet there, introduction, paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. And each paragraph, and we'll do that as we continue, is divided into various sections. Each paragraph has a separate topic. So the organization and logical progression of ideas or flow of ideas in the body, covering that in week 3. So an academic paragraph needs a topic sentence, and we'll cover that in the next slides. Evidence which supports your point, which is normally the cited material, an explanation why it's important, and link to the next or the previous paragraph. Okay, so let's have a look at the Padlet again. Okay, let me go along. I think the second one is more of an article. Okay, so the topic sentence is the first sentence. The topic sentence is the background to the paragraph. It sets the scene. It is the most important sentence. So it's like an inverted pyramid. You go from the general right down to the specific. So when a reader reads your paragraph, reading the first sentence, which is the topic sentence, they should gain a good idea of what the remainder of the paragraph is going to be about. Following the topic sentence, it becomes more specialized, and this is where you start integrating your sources. By integrating sources, it backs up what you are saying in the topic sentence. The same with a lab report. The topics, you're not necessarily integrating sources, but your first sentence is the most important sentence and it sets the scene. And then you continue the following sentence explanation of why it's important. Then in an essay there and an assignment there, it links on to the next one. So I have another Padlet. It's called EAP Writing Conventions. You can either take a picture of that, or I will copy and paste this one. There's lots of really good material on it, and it's also in the module. So the writing conventions. This is really useful. Academic style. You'll have a look at the columns, starting from the left. Academic style, 10 features of academic writing, writing conventions, long sentences and how to avoid them. Make the sentences concise and precise. We've got paragraph structure there, ambiguous writing, precision writing, reporting verbs, what constitutes plagiarism. So I'll be referring to this throughout the session. Okay, and as I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you've got your paragraph structure. This can be broken down into peel. So that might be quite a good way of remembering the structure of a paragraph. And there are a few different ways, but they could all be slightly different, but the fundamental points remain the same. So point, which is the topic sentence. The first sentence is the topic or focus sentence, which comes first and which states the main point of the paragraph. It sets the scene. So if you hold on a second, I will go back to either Padlet. Yes, okay. I am now going to copy and paste and put in the chat a topic sentence, which I have taken from one of the Articles. Okay, have a look at the chat. This is from an article on filtration systems, I think. So, it's just an example. A healthcare waste management strategy refers to a facility's program for managing generated waste for disposal. Full stop. Okay, so that is an introductory sentence, and that sets the scene. We now know what that paragraph is going to be addressing. Okay, so point, example, explanation, or evaluate. So the next one is the example of the evidence. Okay, that backs up the point with evidence. You may have some examples from secondary sources or your own data from research. So that comes next, and we'll be covering that in week 3. So you then explain how the evidence supports a point you're making. Use critical statements. What does it add to the argument? And then if you have an assignment, it can possibly link onto the next paragraph. The following paragraph shows. Okay, so you use clear expressions at all times. You write with conviction and authority. Conviction shows you have a firm belief, and authority shows you have the knowledge. It's also important to exercise caution with hedging. So hedging is used when you're trying to put across something that perhaps you are either not too sure about, or you don't want to make specific assumptions. And modal verbs are used to indicate logical possibility. Tends to, could, may. However, if you look in the Padlet, these are to be used with caution. So here's an example. The Internet of Things can give a new dimension to the internet and can contribute to extensive financial gains, but it also faces some challenges. So you can see those two modals there, the can and the can, which are highlighted in red. You need to be careful by using too many hedging words, as it might signify that you don't really know what you're talking about. But it's good because it shows caution, and it shows a good academic way of not always showing there are other possibilities. Okay, here's another really useful way of expressing your thoughts by using reporting verbs. So English offers a large range of reporting verbs. The ones you choose can affect how the reader interprets what you mean. So you've integrated another source in there. You have another author's viewpoint, and you've paraphrased it. So the reporting verb reflects the degree of certainty of the claim. And again, we'll be discussing this in next week. So if you're looking at an author, you could say that Bachmann, brackets 2018, describes is fairly neutral. Reports, fairly neutral. Remarks, fairly neutral. Okay, so I'll put in another one. Okay, Bachmann 2015 or whatever criticizes. Okay, so that's a strong reporting verb. So when you use, and you can see that again in the Padlet, when you use a good reporting verb, that's your definition of it is coming out. So if you say just describes or reports or outlines, there's not really any of your own thoughts or your ideas coming through that. If you use a really good reporting verb, that means that can indicate that you're comparing or contrasting, or that perhaps one author disagrees with another. There's different ideas. They're really good. So within your academic writing, another thing to focus on always is a coherent flow of ideas. You want the reader to be able to follow what you're saying, or follow kind of your train of thought from the beginning to the end. You don't want to be jumping around from sentence to sentences. So ultimately what you are doing is you are answering the question, either a question you've been set or your own research question. That should always be at the back of your mind. So when you read something, you've got to be saying, does this answer what I'm looking for? And you want to look at coherent flow of ideas. And these are reference pronouns. If you hold on a minute, I will go back to the Padlets and see if there's anything about reference pronouns in it. Might be one on the... Okay, there's nothing on the Padlet there. However, when you are looking, when you're reading an article, when you're reading a report, have a look at the sentences, and you'll see that if you use things like, you could say a sentence. So, for example, you could say, the weather in Scotland today has been a bit brighter than it has been in previous weeks. I had to talk about the weather. It is now it is more likely that it will become warmer over the coming weeks. So I've used that it. Okay, so it refers to the weather. Okay, so if you're using it, this, these, or those within your sentences, it links back to the previous sentence. So don't use the pronouns too many times in sentences, otherwise you kind of lose your track of meaning. But reference pronouns are a good way of making sure that you know you're linking back to the previous sentence. Repetition of words, so I could use the weather. Logical connectors, adding in addition, moreover, giving reasons, due to, for this reason. These are really good. Yes, due to, for this reason. So you can integrate those when you're integrating a source. You need to be sure that there's a reason for you putting that paraphrase in. You're not just putting a paraphrase in for the sake of it. It's got to mean something. For this reason, blah 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 demonstrates. And then you can go in the Padlets and you can look at an article and you can see what kind of examples I've got there. So we've had half an hour. Does anybody have any questions at all? So if you're on your way with the assignments now, you might have there may be some things that you're wondering about. So please feel free to put a question up in the chat. Okay. So accurate use of language, and that comes again under the bit that we discussed at the beginning, which was formal, informal English being too general. So you have your audience and your framework. So you're establishing some background assumptions and terminology to set the stage for conveying information. So you're working within a framework. So you're working with other professionals in your field. You know, you're working kind of at the top of your game. So you will be using specific language. And it may often be language which is quite new to you if you've come over for this year. So you may also be come to terms with different phrases and different technical language. So your language needs to be really accurate. So carefully introduce terminology and use your terminology precisely and consistently. If you have I'm just trying to think of So for example, if I was talking about the use of plastic, you know, we live in an enormous world. So when we're saying the use of plastic, we need to say the use of plastic where? In the UK, in Africa, in America, Southeast Asia, exactly where. So be specific wherever possible. And then I've got here, signal to noise ration. Minimize ambiguity and fuzziness. So have a look at the Padlet and I'll tell you which one to look at. The EAP for Masters Writing Conventions Padlet. Okay, it's the green one. Go along to the right and look at ambiguous writing. And it's a cartoon there. She says, he says, call me a taxi, please. She says, you want me to get you a taxi or tell you you're a taxi. So be precise. And that's quite often one of the things that's found within, when you're reading through master's assignments, is quite often it can be a little bit ambiguous. So be specific wherever possible and don't assume that everybody knows exactly what you're talking about. Okay, so using sources with integrity. How many of you have used Cite Them Right so far? Concerned with referencing. Have you used Cite Them Right, which is the GCU referencing guidance? Oh, okay. I shall show you at the end of this. It's the go-to for referencing. It's really good. So I'll have a okay. Oh, that's great. I mean, it's not great you haven't seen it, but it's great that I'll be able to show you. Okay, it's really good. And next week I'm doing integrating sources with integrity. So I'll show you how to use it next week, and I'll give you a brief look at it today. So essentially, when you're writing a report, when you're writing an assignment, you are using background, you're using supporting information, okay? And you'll get that supporting information from the GSU online, the digital library, okay? Don't bother with Google, because Google, some of it you have to pay for. Secondly, Google doesn't necessarily have the correct academic sources. So in a postgrad assignment, you need to read and report what's been written, and this is the tricky bit, and you also have to evaluate and criticize where appropriate. So you're being set something to research, answer the question. You're using your secondary sources, and you're integrating them into your assignment. And when you integrate them, that means put them in, you need to reference them within the assignment and also at the end. So referencing is important because it shows you've read other sources and used them to develop your own writing, or references should clearly indicate where your ideas come from. And I'll give you a quick look at the library and cite them right at the end of it. So if you don't do that, it counts as plagiarism. So if you hold on a second, I will go to, go back to the Padlet called EAP for Masters Week 1. Go along the columns and click on the bit which says find examples of reporting verbs. Click on that article. I think it's an article, and I don't know yet because it hasn't come up yet. This is where it takes a little bit because it's uploading it from the web. Okay, the article there, which you should have clicked on, is called Ethics Management for the Construction Industry, a review of ethical decision-making literature. Okay, so if you scroll down, you're on page 1, you scroll down to the introduction. Okay, the first sentence, which is the topic sentence, says, and I need my glasses for this, says, many theoretically descriptive models in the realm of ethics management have followed since REST 1984 and 1986 first proposed his 4-component model for understanding ethical decision-making behavior. It's quite a long sentence. Okay, so you will see that the author, that is a paraphrase, that work has been taken from somebody. Okay, it's been taken from REST. So that's the citation, that's the reference within the text. So if you scroll right down to the bottom of that article, and you've got his name's REST, you scroll right down to the bottom to the reference pages, and you look at it down alphabetically, and you will see the full reference. So there you've got in there REST JR 1984 and REST JR 1986. Okay, so that is the full reference of the work that he's carried out. So that's just relating back to the slide there, which says your reference should clearly indicate where your ideas come from. So this will be explained much more fully next week. Okay, so using sources with integrity, basically that means using sources properly, putting sources into your work properly, because if you don't, it's deemed as plagiarism, which isn't a good idea. So it's important to learn how to integrate these references into your writing. So you've got your own viewpoint, you're integrating the sources of other authors, secondary authors, to support what you're saying. Okay, so it's achieved by a mixture of quoting, not really as much, paraphrasing, and summarizing the work of writers you read or the official documents you use. Okay, so go back to Padlet for EAP for Masters Week 1 and go along to the end there. Okay, so go along to the column in the far right-hand side, and it says, what is plagiarism? So this was actually another student put it there, using your work from home. Okay, so if you want to, you'll see the plus button at the top there. You'll see the plus button. If you want to click on that, you can you write a few comments as to what you think plagiarism is. What does plagiarism mean to you? So it's using your own works. You might have done undergraduate work at a different university somewhere. You've come here and you might have you might be thinking you're using, oh, you'll use a bit of that same work. That's you can't, you're not permitted to do that. Plagiarism. Okay, so put up something else. I shall add something using ChatGPT. Okay. Yes, good. Using other people's work without giving them credit for it. That's exactly right. So sometimes, yeah, so anytime, so you're reading somebody's article and you're using their work, but you're not crediting it properly. So it's also the referencing has to be done really correctly. And I'll give you the cite them right link at the end of this. I'll take you through it. So this is some of the common feedback that students get from when they get their assignments back. So insufficient reading. Insufficient reading usually means you've either gone to the digital library and you've maybe just read the first 6 that come up, or it's irrelevant, or it's out of date, or it's taken from a source which isn't deemed to be academic or whatever. So reading should encompass a variety of sources, websites, journals, books, databases. If you stick only to internet resources, you won't get as good a mark. That doesn't show any depth of reading. So discussion should cover the what of the topic. Analysis covers the why. So you've moved up a notch here. You're not simply describing something. You're not simply describing the continuing or the increased use of mobile phones or internet devices or whatever. You are analysing the impact of it, as just an example. So description sets the scene. It keeps the scriptive writing to a minimum. Don't just say what, discuss why it's significant, how it compares to other views, and how it applies to your point. That's really important. You're making a point there. How do these things that you've read support what you're saying? In contrast, in addition, this points to the fact that, this highlights that. So you have your own viewpoint there, and the secondary sources are supporting it. Okay, for each piece of coursework, you'll be asked to address some of the criteria and the relative importance of these criteria will be given to the assignment information and additional explanation from the lecturer. So when you're given your coursework brief out, you'll be given the marking rubric, which shows you the percentages that you'll be given should you adhere to fulfilling the criteria. You'll be paraphrasing. Watch out. There's a growing concern, paraphrasing and lack of rules. Students aren't writing from sources, but writing from sentences selected from sources. So particularly if you're feeling a bit stressed, or if you've got 2 assignments to do at the same time and you think, oh my God, I can't manage all this. So what it's tempting to do is to get a few sentences from a few different sources and kind of stitch them together. But unfortunately, that means there's no flow, and your own point isn't coming through from it. That's called patchwork paraphrasing. So in order to address that, there's a 30-minute bite-sized workshop Wednesday the 21st, which I think is next Wednesday. And I've covered the basic fundamentals of academic writing. These are the main things to watch out for.